Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm a little late getting back to you because I had some questions about the IEP final project. So let me just take a few moments and go over that and see if I can answer some of your questions. Um, the purpose of this project is to give you some experience or exposure if you've not had some exposure so far in writing an IEP plan for a student, because the IEP is the tool by which we implement or enact all of that legislative stuff that you've been learning about, like the least restrictive environment, accommodations and modifications, etc. And so it's put in this course just to give you a chance, an opportunity to take what you've learned and implement it into a final project with an IEP, very much abbreviated form. Like they can be very long, and I gave you something that's very abbreviated, but mainly so that it wouldn't be too overwhelming for you. So let me just go through the sections. The student profile, it's a brief background of the student, and it's really important, in my estimation, that you say things that are personal about the student, that you personalize the student profile. In other words, if you start with Tyler as a sophomore in high school, and this is where he does bad, he's not good in math, or he's not good in reading, or he can't do this, it sets a bad tone. So like one of the things that the case study talks about is he's sort of a shy kid, but he's bright. He's engaging. He seems to have like a good sense of humor and an ability to make people comfortable, kind of be around kind of guy. Those are nice things to put in a student profile, because that's something that the parents are going to read, and it sets forth the plan that you're going to have. So what most people do in these things is write something personal about the student that is strengths-based, and then they'll make a couple of statements after that. For example, he's getting services related to a specific learning disability for reading and written expression. And in this case, this student has a relative strength. He's not, straight A student by any means, but he's doing rather well in mathematics. So briefly mentioning, this is kind of where we're going. There's some issues with reading and some issues with math. That's really what you need in a profile. So a student profile, that can be, when I say brief, that can be a paragraph. It's just to sort of set the stage for, this is who Tyler is, and this is where we're headed in terms of how we're going to support Tyler. There's a lot of information that's there about his present levels of performance. When you're looking at present levels of performance, you just need to make some statements that tell us where the student is and where they need to be going. So for example, in terms of reading, some of the data that's there says that he has difficulty with I'm trying to remember now, but I think it's with decoding and with reading fluency. I remember his reading fluency levels were below grade level. You can pick out anything that you see that is a need area. Okay, so let's say that you want to work on fluency strategies as an example, right? Then all you need to do is write a measurable annual goal that will say, and I've given you a couple of websites on how to write measurable goals, that he will, for example, apply fluency strategies to read at, let's see, I think he was about the 6th grade level, as I recall. So like you might say that you want him to be reading at the 7th grade level with more accuracy. And that's going to be measured by the evaluations that you put down. And I gave you also a bunch of evaluations. For example, there is something that is just kind of like fluency readings, where kids read and they read for fluency, and a teacher uses sort of a checklist to see how they're doing. It could also just be looking at work products that are turned in during the week. It could be observations of the student. So you can talk about how you want to evaluate the student and what kind of a goal that you'll set for the student based upon the data that you have read about. And then the benchmarks, okay? The benchmarks are just what are the 4 steps that will lead to meeting the annual goal. There's 2 ways of doing that, okay? I'm going to give you the easiest way, and I'm going to give you, well, it's not really a harder way, but it's just a different way, I guess. But kind of the easiest way, oftentimes, is you'll look at where a student is, and let's say that the student's fluency rate is around 50%, let's say, okay? And so you might say that by the first grading period, it'll be 60%. By the second grading period, it'll be 70%. By the third grading period, it'll be 80%. Do you see where I'm going? Or let's just say, I'm just throwing out a silly one here, but let's just say, like, you know, it's a young child and they're learning the alphabet. You know, they'll learn A through F by the first marking period, or they'll G through M by the second marking period. The benchmarks just say, here's my goal. Here's what we want. We want this student reading more fluently, like at the 7th grade level, at the 8th grade level. And the benchmarks are just like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I gave you 2 ways to do it. One's really easy, which is just like using percentages, 60, 70, 80. The other one is breaking it down in different ways. It could be that you want to look at different areas of fluency and build upon those areas. And so that might be starting with like a lower level task for fluency and moving up to a higher level task associated with fluency. And then you just need to make a comment as to whether there are any accommodations or modifications that you think are necessary to meet this goal. Okay, so accommodations could be a number of things, from the way that you guide the student. It could be about the kind of feedback that you give to the student. It could be using a strategy chart. It could be using like a Venn diagram, you know, all kinds of things where you take little bubbles and you look at concepts and help people look at the concept of the many issues, I'm not issues, but the many elements that make up understanding. So if that's where you're going, you want to look at what would the student need to be able to do what I've asked them to do. And that's an accommodation or a modification. Okay. Another way to look at it is accommodations are the student might need more time to be able to complete assignments. The student might need a quiet setting without distractions. A modification could be that a student does less problems or activities. Like, you know, if most students are doing something with 20 questions, a modification, we'd be reducing that to 10 questions. So again, I'm not trying to dummy down this project, but I'm also telling you, I'm just trying to get you to learn the form, to learn what an IEP is, to learn what a benchmark is, what an accommodation is. And that's the main goal. Okay, so the point is that I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, you have a fluency goal that says he should be, you know, here, and are you kidding me? Right, because we don't even know this student. This is purely, you're taking some information from a case study and a bunch of data, and you're writing something. So pick a simple goal for reading and a simple goal for math. Okay, and it's really easy to do that. I gave you, I believe, and if it's not there, I'll check and see. If it's not, I'll upload something. But you can just look at the Illinois State Standards. And if he's reading at a 6th grade level, and you're going to look at 6th grade reading, go to the Illinois State Standards and look at that. Say, what are the reading standards say? Okay, so now I want to look at like what he needs to be doing to move towards 7th grade, right? Pick one idea to move towards 7th grade. Write a goal for that, 4 benchmarks. Just tell me how you would evaluate it, whether it be like observations, classroom assignments, how that, if it's going to be verbal, maybe it's something he's giving you to orally, something that's in written. Just tell, how are you going to evaluate it? Okay. Those are the only things you need to do for 2 things, math and for reading. Now in the math area, his skills are better. But there's still some things that he could really be working toward. And one of those that I was thinking about was using something with like, given a word problem, that he would be able to show his work and solve a problem, let's say 3 out of 5 opportunities, or 4 out of 5 times, he can perform the task of solving a word problem. That's just one idea. Okay. And if that's the case, once again, you can utilize the idea of, if you think he's like at about 50%, you can utilize 60, 70, 80. Or one other thing that you can do is that you can look at how many opportunities he has to perform, and then taking those opportunities that he has to perform and increasing those. So for example, let's say that we want him to be able to successfully solve a word problem. Let's say like 4 out of 5 opportunities, you want him to solve a word problem, 4 to 5 opportunities. Okay. So benchmark 1 might be 1 or 2 out of 5. Benchmark 2 might be 2 or 3 out of 5. Well, I'm mixing it up. It could just be 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5. Do you see where I'm going? So the benchmarks are just like, this is going to show how we're moving toward mastery of this topic. Okay. Now, I just want to remind you that on D2L, I gave you a whole bunch of things like accommodations lists and formal and informal assessments. Just pick and choose. I mean, I want to be clear again that I don't want you just to throw things into boxes. I want you to kind of look at this guy and say, now, what would be a good IEP? But on the other hand, don't get so anxious that like I'm sitting here grading you on, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have worked on fluency. You know, how stupid. I wouldn't have worked on word problems. How crazy. I wouldn't do that. Like, what's wrong with her? That's not it at all. You know, I want you just to say, okay, I looked at where the kid is. I looked at where the kid needs to go. I came up with a goal, right? I've already written my narrative at the top about who this guy is. Now I've written a goal for what I think would be a measurable outcome, a measurable annual goal for an outcome. And that's a big goal. So it's like by the end of this year, that would be an annual goal, he will be able to do word problems 4 out of 5 times. 4 out of 5 opportunities will be correct. And that's where we're going to be at the end of the year. So benchmark 1, as I said a minute ago, 1 out of 5 or 50%. Benchmark 2, 2 out of 5 or 60%, or however you want to write that in those places. And then I asked you about transition goals. Those do not have to be really fancy, but I gave you a lot of information about transition. Now we know some things about Tyler, the student, that his family has a construction company, and that he would like a career in the same field. So if you're thinking about transition, it might be like what are post-secondary programs for training in construction, or maybe there's something about on-site kind of work. Maybe he needs some kind of work skills. Maybe he needs to learn how to budget. I don't know. I mean, that's not exactly related to his working for his dad's company necessarily, but you know, maybe in terms of transitioning, he needs help with those kinds of things. Being able to live independently. This student, with a specific learning disability, is a much higher functioning student. So they probably wouldn't need a tremendous amount of help. But if you look, I mean, in the areas I was just talking about, that's usually for people who have more disabling kinds of conditions. But it's still appropriate if you look through the transition list and you see something in those skill sets, like, you know, he should learn how to do banking, right? That's fine for me. I don't know that he does or does not know how to do banking, and you don't know either, because we're just reading a case study, but it would be a perfectly appropriate transition goal. So I just put it there for you to be thinking that as students get older, part of the IEP process is for us to say, okay, by the time they exit the school system at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, depending on when they exit, because they can stay up until 22, because the law goes until 21, right? We want to say that on the day that they walk out of the school, we have transition goals that we've been working on for years so that they are more ready to meet life and being able to work independently. The next to the last thing is the social emotional goals, and I gave you a link to look at that. That is purely for me to get you to think about the fact that we need to be embedding social emotional goals into what we work in what we work on with students. And so this could be a number of things that he could do. He could be working on developing a plan of action for getting his work done in school. It could be his working on accepting disappointments and loss, like when work is really difficult, being able to rework a plan, being able to start over and to problem solve more effectively in a plan. A lot of those things fall under social emotional goals. So just pick two that you think sound appropriate. The last thing is an LRE statement. And I said, please describe the student participation and indicate why this plan is the least restrictive environment. The reason I asked you to do that is stupid simple, okay? Really simple. We need to be able to tell parents how we came to a decision about what is least restrictive. And that's the only reason I ask you to tell me. How would you describe this to a parent? How would you talk about this kind of, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if I actually said, it's how you say it to a parent, but in essence, that's what I mean. It's like we need to be able to describe how we got to least restrictive and how that decision came to be based on what we know. Because oftentimes there are concerns about parents either wanting more for their student or their child or less for their child. I don't know if I should say less, but like they might want more inclusion in the general education curriculum, and we don't see that as the least restrictive environment, or they want way more services and things and in the special ed realm, and we don't see that as relevant. We just need to practice and get good at stating why the least restrictive environment has been met by the plan that we have set forth. I hope this answers some questions. I want to just say before I close, please, please, please don't overthink this. Look at where the student is. Pick a goal in math. Pick a goal in reading that you think makes for a good annual goal for this student. Then you're able to come with benchmarks, what those are going to be, any accommodations, and how you'll evaluate it. And then the other sections I just talked about, the social emotional skills, the transition plan, and the least restrictive environment statement. I think probably people, if I were you and I was doing this project, I would be getting caught up in there's a right answer. There really isn't a right answer. There is a right place on the form, to put things, and you do want it to be relevant to the student. So, for example, if somebody came up with a goal and said, we're going to work on matching colors, I'm going to say, I think he's a little above matching colors. Now, I'm not saying you can just throw anything in a blank, but I am saying pick up the standards. Pick up like a good curriculum and just look at them. This is something he should be working on as a 7th grade math student, 7th grade level math student, or 8th grade level math student, wherever you place the student, and then go from there. So don't overthink it and think that there's some kind of perfect answer. There really isn't. Okay, so I hope this was helpful, and I'll get this posted right now. And after you see this, if you still have questions, would you please let me know, and I'll either make another videotape for you, or I can address any questions that you have individually. I hope this finds you all doing well. We're almost done with the summer session, thank goodness, right? And I look forward to reading your project soon. Thanks.